Hi there, my name is Aaron. The name Gareb Shamus, Lars Pearson, Brian Cunningham, and Patrick McCollum may not ring as strongly with you comic collectors now. Lars probably will, because you do see him over on Near Mint Condition quite often, actually. A very entertaining commentator on the channel. But for a lot of us in the 90s, when the whole big boom of comics started, the Image era, the Valiant time of comics, it was an epic time because we got the great bottle of comic books, and that would be this right here. This is Wizard magazine. I got some earlier ones. This one here is issue 83, and it's got the fold-out Adam Hughes cover, which is super kind of cool. So basically what had happened initially was that, so Shamus was not just an artist and publisher of this comic, but he also worked at with his, and I bring it off here so I can actually read it. He worked at a comic shop that was owned by his parents, and he ran a newsletter in the comic shop for the patrons there called The Wizard Guide to Comics. Now, that was just a regular newsletter that went into the store itself. So just imagine a local comic shop starts doing like a newsletter, starts doing basically what's going on in comics, the hot books, the picks, that type of thing. And just imagine that it's become so popular that it decides to turn it into a glossy magazine. Now, Wizard was known not just for having amazing artists on the covers. The early issues, especially of Wizard, pushed things, a lot of things like Valiant and Image when they were just getting started. They were the ones that were kind of like helping to make rock stars out of the Image creators, and help us see that whereas Image was the one with the beautiful pictures and the gorgeously drawn men and women, Valiant was the comic company that was more serious in that it worked like with storylines, and the storylines were intricately done. It gave companies that had just come out a voice and an identity. It really helped push that along. So when you look at the Image revolution, all that happened, you can thank Wizard magazine in a large part for getting Image and Valiant to get to that next level. See, DC and Marvel really probably didn't need the push. Well, Marvel might have had the time, actually, that Wizard could give. Wizard came out at a particularly great time. 1991 was a changing time in comics, and some people look back at the 90s era comics and they cringe a bit. But I particularly love the 90s era of comics. Now, they didn't just do Wizard. They had like a toy one, like I think it was Toy Fair. They had like another comic called Inquest, which dealt with more like the Magic the Gathering games and those type of like card games. Lars Pearson's was the editor. He's in charge of this here. So this is a comic book price guide, and this is a Bible that everybody went by. People still think of Overstreet as being that like comic price guide that people used to use, and they have the big Overstreet book that will come out like usually once a year. But during the 90s, this was where we looked toward. This is the thing that we looked at. Overstreet even did a magazine themselves to kind of, not sure when they started there, it's kind of be like Wizard. But Wizard, no matter what other magazine came out, there was Hero, there was a lot of other ones, Wizard just really was always on the pulse of comic readers, and they understood it better than anybody else. We got to see things like the top 10 hot writers and artists, and this is, what year is this? 1998. So Kurt Busiek and Joe Kelly, Grant Morrison, Mark Waid, and Steven T. Seagal, and Garth Ennis, Peter David, Matt Wagner, Jane Bromson, and Christina Z are the top 10 writers. Top 10 writers, artists at the time were Michael Turner, Jim Lee, Joe Madeira, J. Scott Campbell, Alex Ross, Adam Kubert, Andy Kubert, Chris Bacala, George Perez, rest in peace, and Linnell Yu, who was doing Wolverine at the time. They would give you like the hot picks. They would have like creator things. One of the neat things that they had, and they did this before a lot of long before the Marvel movies and the DC movies came about, they did something called Cast and Call, where they would take comic books and they would take actors and say, okay, this would be the best actor for this role. They actually chose Patrick Stewart for the role of Professor X long before there was a X-Men movie that was made. They did their like things on video games, but really wanted to see this was for like things like this. You would have like promotional comic tie-ins like Spider-Man half or kind of zero issue comics where you could like send in these here things and get like a special comic book, which would become, you know, super collectible. They also will, in the early issues especially, would have trading cards. So in a December issue, for instance, like a Christmas issue, you could get you get a comic book, a bunch of trading cards, a poster. They'd have posters in a lot of theirs. They'd have a lot of foldouts. They really focus on the characters in the art, and you go through things like the summer preview, much in the way that your at the time your local TV guide would do their fall preview. They would do their previews for like the upcoming comic seasons per se, and it was really interesting to check into. This one here actually has a little thing on the upcoming No Man's Land, which now, of course, now is a classic Batman storyline and one that I really enjoyed. Did have contests. It was one of the greats, and I would love to see a company like this, a company like Wizard, come back out and do another magazine like this. I know it's hard in a digital era to get like a magazine to work and to be funded and get people to buy it on a regular basis, but if you did like this and not like the Ladder Wizard, which unfortunately turned into this very thin comic magazine, this here was looked bigger, and these were even bigger than this when they initially came out. I got a few of the early ones there. I'm very proud to have them in my collection. So if you're lucky enough to live in the time when Wizard magazine was on your local comic shelves, then congratulations. If you weren't, I'd say go back and check out some of the early Wizard magazines, because they're really, really good. Now, just to give you like the date there, Wizard started in July of 1991. It did not end until 2011. Pretty good run. We got like a 20-year run here, but in all honesty, after the original, like after 2006, when they lost their original, kind of co-editor, and they lost Pat McCollum, and they lost Brian Cunningham close to the same time. I think they were let go. It changed, and it wasn't the same as it was before. They did try after a while to go back and say, okay, we're going to back focus on comics again, but by then the magazine had gotten too thin. It was unfortunately too late. But I will never forget going to my comic shop back in the day, or going to my local store that had them, eagerly waiting and picking up the latest polybagged, because they're polybagged, because of the cards and posters and the whole works in there. Wizard magazine, getting back home, tearing it open, reading it from cover to cover over and over again. And much in the way when I was a kid and I had my TV guide, I would be choosing what Saturday morning shows and which of the new fall programming I would watch. I would use Wizard magazine. I would get a piece of paper, and I would write out the comics that I wanted to get the next week at my local comic shop when they came out, if I was lucky enough to get in time to get them. Still never got that Death of Superman with the Iron Band. Still looking for that one. My name is Aaron. Thank you for joining me today in the Call to Comics. And if you have never, ever checked out Wizard magazine, do so. They're very inexpensive to pick up now. And they have some great artwork on here, and some great cover artists too. People like Jim Lee, people like Todd McFarlane. You got artwork from Adam Hughes, and this one, and a lot of these had basically different art. So where this one had this cover, it also had an Astro City cover by Alex Ross. They had a lot of focus on Alex Ross in their artwork as well, and I know there's some Alex Ross fans out there just like me. So I'll see you guys soon here in the Call to Comics. Remember, there's always another comic. Unfortunately, there's not another Wizard magazine. So remember this: treat yourself kindly and pay that forward to others, and it'll pay back to you. I'll see you soon here in the Call to Comics, and go and enjoy yourself another comic or collected edition.